Welcome, everybody, to the Luke Beasley Show. I feel like it has been ages since I went live. Had a wonderful vacation. Let me see you guys in the chat, make sure everything looks good. Wonderful vacation. Went to Colorado, and then I went to Los Angeles to see some friends. Had my birthday. That was wonderful. But now we're back, and the one thing I love is whenever I go on vacation, I often get very... I long for my routine to be returned, which is a good sign. It means I have a routine that I enjoy. Jeremy, yes, I'm back. I'm so glad. But yeah, wonderful vacation, lots of relaxation. Tried to keep some content coming out, which was kind of a grind because it's very easy to kind of put everything together each day when I know exactly what I needed to do because, you know, my lights are set up, my audio gear is there, and everything's kind of situated. But trying to figure that out on vacation was interesting. But we managed, and now we're back, so hooray. Hello, Jared. Good to be with you. There's someone I'm hoping will show up during the show today because he keeps asking to debate me in the comments, and I said, sure, let's do it. Here's my email. But then he's not emailing me, and then he'll put another comment the next day on another video and say, let's debate. How can I contact you? And I respond to that comment. I say, email, and I give him the email, and he doesn't send it to me. So, hello, Saleem. We have a huge show, lots of important stuff. I won't be doing a super long stream today right now, but I will later tonight. So I'm doing the news right now, then I have a dinner to go to, and then I'll come back, do some school, and then go live again later. So if you're up super late tonight, we'll be watching the Turning Point USA stuff. So tune in there. How many different recording sessions? 3. I shot 3 shows that spanned that I uploaded videos throughout the week from. So, yep. All right, let's go ahead and just jump into our first story. Don't forget to like the stream, send super chats if you want me to read your chat for sure, along with a lot of appreciation. Become a patron, patreon.com/Luke Beasley if you want to support the show. All that good stuff. Yep. In the wake of everything that happened during January 6th, Donald Trump trying to overturn the lawful election results and spreading a lie that led to people storming the Capitol, and of course all of the repercussions of that, many people, especially on the left, but you would hope everyone across the country would share this sentiment, is really curious if the things that Trump did violated the law, which I believe they did. I do not believe it is lawful for a president to try to subvert the will of the people, stay in power, regardless of the election results or against the election results. I don't think that's something that is lawful or intended in the Constitution, etc. So, with that being said, if you believe that he violated the law, the next big question is, will the DOJ prosecute him? There's a few different criminal investigations going on, and so people are looking towards the DOJ to federally prosecute him, but people are also keeping their eye on the Georgia investigation centered around that call he had where he asked for 11,000 votes. Come on, give me 11,000 votes. But because the DOJ is being looked at, obviously Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, is kind of front and center. And for a long time, just based on his public comments on this, it seemed like there wasn't much urgency. Now, with investigations such as these, of course, it's going to be done in private. And I actually am not someone who's like, oh, Merrick Garland sucks, he's not doing anything, because we don't know. Now, it's kind of a tough situation to be in, because if we get multiple months down the line and still don't see anything, yes, Merrick Garland is going to be someone we need to blame for that, but it all could be happening right now just behind closed doors. Obviously, why would he come out and give any specifics? But we did recently see in a CNN interview the most kind of obvious hint towards that being the direction that the DOJ is headed towards from Merrick Garland himself that I've seen. Maybe he's said similar comments in the past. I just haven't seen them. This was a pretty obvious nod to the fact that he will or is going after Donald Trump and does think there's evidence for it. So we'll see. Obviously, he still stayed kind of vague with his language, but we'll watch, and you guys can, of course, let me know what you think in the comments, and we'll discuss afterwards. That line was what really perked my ears up. He says, anyone who interfered in the lawful, peaceful transition of power from one administration to another. That's more than just saying anyone who caused violence on January 6th, anyone who, all these things that could apply to other people. The first person that's going to come to your mind when you think who was trying to interfere with a lawful transition of power from one administration to another, Donald Trump. So the fact that he threw that in there did, to me, make it clear that he was indicating Trump is the person he's alluding to. Before we let him answer this, the reason he's asking that is there's been reporting coming out recently that Donald Trump is wanting to announce his candidacy for president in 2024 sooner rather than later so that these criminal investigations can't land on him. He thinks he'll have kind of a shield around him if he's running for president because people will be afraid to try to prosecute a presidential candidate. And so it's interesting that Lawrence O'Donnell's asking this, and also interesting how Merrick Garland responds. So he sticks with what he previously said, again, using that phrase, the lawful transition of power from one administration to another, and the interference with that is interesting because that's really the role that Trump played. I think there's an argument to be made about could you actually pin on him the riling up of the crowd to go to the Capitol. Was it really his intention that they stormed the Capitol, or was it just a big protest he wanted? I think that would be really hard to prove in court. But is it hard to prove in court that he was trying to interfere with the lawful transition of power from one administration to the next? No, that would be very easy to prove. He explicitly said things to that effect out in the open, that he was not going to respect that transition of power, that his intention was to stay in power and keep his administration as the administration in the White House, even though that was not a reflection of the election results that were proven time and time again to be free and fair and not have anywhere enough fraud to affect the election at all. So fascinating stuff. I am curious to see if Merrick Garland keeps pushing like this. I don't think he needs to talk publicly, just do it all behind closed doors, but then present us with a really good outcome. And of course, by good, I just mean a justice-based outcome that is equivalent to whatever laws you can prove that Trump violated. And I do think in a democracy, obviously everyone screams, it's a republic. I hear that so often. Yes, a democratic republic. So a government that's supposed to have a democratic representation. You should not have a situation where a president, the top person in power, can attempt to stay in power even whenever the election went the opposite way and not be held accountable for it. You cannot have that, be allowed in a democratic society where the most powerful person does not respect the very democracy they're representing. So interesting stuff, and we will continue to follow it very closely. Oh, shoot. Oh my gosh. Wait, can you hear me? Oh. Shoot. Okay, deepest apologies. I'll play that video for you right now. I'm trying to figure out where that... I see. Dang, guys. I'm so sorry. Here we go. I guess for the video I can just overlay audio later. But for you guys, let me know if you can hear this.
This without fear or favor. We intend to hold anyone who was criminally responsible for the events surrounding January 6th, for any attempt to interfere with the lawful transfer of power from one administration to another, accountable. That's what we do. We don't pay any attention to other issues with respect to that.
So if Donald Trump were to become a candidate for president again, that would not change your schedule or how you move forward or don't move forward?
Say again that we will hold accountable anyone who was criminally responsible for attempting to interfere with the legitimate, lawful transfer of power from one administration to the next.
Okay, so that's the video I just played. Sorry, guys. I still had my vacation settings on my computer where it was a different source was selected when I was doing stuff out of the hotel room. Apologies. Ugh, that's so awkward. But you heard my commentary, so I'm not going to re-say all my commentary. It's so awkward, though. Lord have mercy. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for screaming. I actually don't have chat open when I'm doing the stories, and then I look over and read it afterwards. I switch over to it. So that's why I couldn't see you screaming that the video had no sound. Yeah, the editor can fix it later. I just feel bad if anybody watches this live stream afterwards. They're going to be hecka confused. Luckily, it was only a 30-second clip. Imagine if it was one of the longer clips that we watch. Okay. Let's see. Let's go ahead and jump into our next story. One of the aspects of the plot by Donald Trump and his allies to stay in power that has been focused on is this fake electors scheme. So the idea was, with our current process for electing the president, the state legislatures, based on the vote in their state, send electors to Washington to cast their vote as a part of the Electoral College for whoever the presidential candidate was that won that state. And that's an official process, like I said, that goes through the state legislature. So the idea that people close to Trump had was, hey, instead of them counting the actual electors who actually represent the vote that happened in their state, what if we just go and say we're the electors, and we just sign some bogus form saying we're the electors, and cause a situation where people in the Senate and in Congress and Mike Pence possibly could use these other electors as an excuse to say, oh, clearly there's some discrepancies here. Excuse me. Clearly there's some confusion. Let's send it back to the states, or whatever they wanted to happen, or just recognize those electors fraudulently and pretend that those are the correct people casting their vote for Trump, even though Biden won that state. So more and more information has come out about it, and an interesting article from the Washington Post is laying out some new information that came out of investigations into this that revealed some emails that were correspondence between different people organizing this scheme to pretend to be fake electors to try to keep Trump in power. So let's take a look at that. In recent months, the various investigations into January 6th have increasingly zeroed in on the fake electors for President Donald Trump. In states that Trump lost, the fake electors were people who claimed they were duly chosen, something he later tried to leverage to get Vice President Mike Pence to help overturn the election on that fateful day. So again, the idea was, if we can at least have these other electors that we claim to be the correct ones, even if we don't recognize those through the official process, because how would you even do that? That would be at least enough of an excuse for Mike Pence to say that he isn't able to certify the proper election results. Continuing on, but both when they were designated on December 14th, 2020, and since, these fake electors have almost always been described as a contingency plan in this whole process. So what they lay out there is, initially it seemed like this wasn't the primary plot by any means, but was kind of just another little thing on the side, a contingency plan, as they called it. But then, continue on, new evidence though suggests that at least some involved might have understood the fake elector plan differently from very early in the process. A New York Times report details a batch of new emails related to the fake elector plot. Figuring prominently is a Phoenix-based lawyer who worked with the Trump campaign, Jack Wilenchik. Wilenchik corresponded with Trump campaign advisor Boris Epshteyn and others on December 8th, according to the Times report. In one email, he outright refers to the electors, listen to this, as fake electors, before later suggesting that the more palatable phrase would be alternate electors. So to kind of give you the summary of that, this Wilenchik dude and the Boris Epshteyn dude are talking over email and referring to this idea of sending other electors to Washington to pretend that they represent the state's vote as fake electors. They were calling these people fake electors in this plot they were coming up with themselves, recognizing these aren't the legitimate electors. This is a complete fraudulent process, trying to claim Trump to be the winner when he wasn't. And then at one point they say, hey, maybe we should call it alternate electors. That's maybe a little bit more palatable than fake electors. Many have suggested that this line shows that that those involved knew these electors were fake to begin with. However, Wilenchik used the word in quotation marks, perhaps suggesting he was borrowing someone else's word. But perhaps the more striking development is how he described their purpose. Here we go. Quote, we would just be sending in fake electoral votes to Pence so that someone in Congress can make an objection when they start counting votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be counted. He summarized a proposal by Trump allied lawyer Kenneth Chesebro as designating the fake electors so that members of Congress can fight about whether they should be counted on January 6th. So now we're getting the evidence behind what we knew was going on. People who wanted to keep Trump in power were coming up with a plot to pretend there's these other electors that they were even referring to as fake electors, so that people in Congress could have some justification to go, hey, listen, I think we should recognize those electors because they represent what I believe happened in that state. And then that would throw us into a constitutional crisis where this process that's just supposed to be kind of ceremoniously certifying the next president, Congress is saying, yes, we recognize that the executive branch is now going to be taken over by this new administration. You're taking that process and preventing it from happening, but there's no guidelines for, well, what happens then? The president isn't certified. Of course, we do know that when a president can't be formally elected and all that type of stuff, and there's an issue in the process, you can get the House of Representatives involved and they cast their votes for president instead. But you would have thrown us into a serious constitutional crisis by preventing the normal lawful process to go through, where Joe Biden was recognized as the next president of the United States. And so this was one plot among many that they had to try to do that. And it was more in the center of their plan than I think we previously thought. As you can see here, they wanted to create some of this confusion and create a plan for fake electors to go to Washington, pretend that they represented their state's vote, so that Pence and people in Congress would have an excuse to not certify the election results. Of course, we know Pence didn't go along with that. and this didn't really go the way that they had planned, but they knew what they were doing to the point where they were referring to this plan as fake electors. Wild, and scary stuff. What y'all think? Read the chat. I'm looking for, gosh, what was his name? I could find it in my YouTube comments, but I want to connect with the guy who wanted to debate me. Oh, by the way, I think, let me check my DMs. Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. I just got confirmation that tomorrow we'll be having a debate with an objectivist, so very small government dude, who is interested in chatting about that. I think it should be a really fascinating conversation. All right, let's get into our next story. During a speech at a Turning Point USA event over the weekend, Matt Gaetz, well known for his possible involvement in a sex trafficking situation, said that Mike Pence is never going to become president. Of course, ever since Mike Pence didn't go along with Donald Trump's attempt to overturn the election results, a lot of people in kind of the MAGA movement have turned on Pence, even though he was loyal to Trump each step of the way until then. And Matt Gaetz is going along with that and saying, listen, Pence, one thing I know for sure, he's never going to be president, which is probably, that's a fine thing to say. It's true. Pence is probably never going to be president. But it was really, really interesting because that clip of Matt Gaetz was played and on a TV program. And Marc Short, who was Mike Pence's chief of staff, so Mike Pence loyalist, presumably, had to respond to it. They played the clip for him to respond to. And he had just the best, most slam dunk response to Matt Gaetz. Let's take a look.
On that note, let me just say what everybody here knows. Mike Pence will never be president. Nice guy, not a leader.
Marc?
Well, I don't know if Mike Pence will run for president in 2024, but I don't think Matt Gaetz will have an impact on that. In fact, I'd be surprised if he was still voting. It's more likely he'll be in prison for child sex trafficking by 2024. And I'm actually surprised that Florida law enforcement still allows him to speak to teenage conferences like that. So I'm not too worried about Matt Gaetz. Thanks.
Ooh, hit him right in the gut. True. I don't think we should care too much about what Matt Gaetz says, and there is a good chance, based on the investigations into him right now, that he possibly won't be able to vote in 2024. It is very confusing that it has taken so long for any more progress publicly to be announced on this investigation, but we know a lot came out. The guy who was super close to Matt Gaetz giving up a lot of information into the possible underage sex trafficking that Matt Gaetz did. So bad guy. Obviously, that's still technically all alleged, so we don't know for sure. But regardless of that, Matt Gaetz seems like a pretty bad guy. So watching someone who is, even though Marc Short and I aren't going to necessarily get along, he's probably a lifelong Republican. I get along with lots of Republicans, but I'm saying in our policies, we're not going to get along. But watching him slam dunk like that on Matt Gaetz and saying, listen, before I even get to your question, because I don't even know if Mike Pence is going to run, let me just say, I don't care what Matt Gaetz has to say, which I think every time Matt Gaetz talks, tweets, whatever, we should be reminding him of the fact that we don't care what you have to say, alleged sex trafficker. Good stuff. But to the point of Mike Pence possibly running for president and possibly having a chance, just to quickly look at recent polling on that, based on the compilation of multiple polls, this one, when you include Trump in the running, you have Pence at close to 10% of the vote. Trump's at 53%, DeSantis is at 24%, and Pence is at 9.7%, it's almost 10%. So yeah, that's not great. I don't think he has a chance of beating Trump or DeSantis at all. I think the Republican Party has moved too much in the direction of Trump, of all of those lies that he's telling, that someone like Pence, who even though he's super conservative, super right-wing, has at least enough of a moral bone in his body to recognize whenever an election doesn't go his way, and recognize whenever such a blatant lie as the ones Trump was telling about the election is just that. So I think the fact that he went against Trump in all the 2020 stuff is going to tank his chances of any possible run, just kind of as a second thing. Or he could run, but a possible victory. When you take Trump out of the running, let's say he decides not to, DeSantis is now at 38% and Pence is at 14.5%. So, let's say 38% to 15% with Pence as the second place option. So 15% before you've even announced is not bad. You can make a lot of ground off of that, especially when there are a lot of Republican options being floated. But I don't think he would have a chance if DeSantis tried to run. And so we're in an interesting moment where it looks like over half of the Republican Party is no longer on board with Trump, but that doesn't mean they want someone like Pence, who represents a little bit more of the old guard Republican. They might want someone who is unhinged enough, like DeSantis, who can really score those seriously right-wing victories. Even though, again, Pence would do a lot of really conservative stuff, I think he has lost their favor because he didn't want to overturn the 2020 election. So that's just kind of a little side note, because the two kind of were beefing over the possibility of Mike Pence running. But I don't think he has a good chance. I still love seeing Matt Gaetz dunked on, though. Thank you so much to BR Madden for the super chat. They said, Luke, how can I get your level of confidence and charisma? Do tell. Oh, that is so sweet. How to get it? Well, to the extent that I recognize myself for having that, which I do recognize confidence, can't judge charisma so much, but I feel confident most of the time. I would say... Okay, ready? We're going to do I'm actually going to try to answer this question and not just say thank you. But just about confidence. Charisma, I guess, be very analytical. And again, when I think of myself, I have tons of critiques all the time. But try to be super analytical about how you play, like how you come off in social settings. And then read people and adjust. So if you say jokes and nobody laughs, like, stop telling those jokes. And if you realize you talk too much because people are trying to butt in, you're like, oh shoot, just be super aware of your social settings. I think other people are the best kind of mirrors for learning about yourself. How do people respond to me, and how can I get them to respond better? And then the confidence piece is like spend time recognizing the good parts about you and then pull those out of yourself. Like, what are your strengths? Put those at the forefront. And lean into those. So for me, if I recognized, hey, I really feel like I'm knowledgeable about politics, I feel like I'm good at communicating, then I'm going to put those at the forefront and do a show where I'm, talking about politics and communicating. So that would be my advice on that. And then, of course, try to work on yourself, but don't obsess over your insecurities, I guess, is the point. Oh, and last thing, everyone's a person. That's huge. Just like when you're in any interaction thing, this is just a little old person who, goes to the restroom like everyone else, cries like everyone else, all these things. So I'm going to recognize that I'm just as, I don't like this word, but like socially powerful as they are. I have just as much a right to be talking and sitting here and everything as they do. Cool. All right, let's jump into our next story. We're now going to talk about something pretty disturbing. A report came out about a busted plot by an individual who happens to be a former Marine. I don't think this is at all supposed to be a message about anti-Marine stuff. This is just someone who happened to be a Marine who has a horrible ideology, and to the Marines' credit, they did kick him out or remove him from the Marines based on this ideology, from what I understand. But this individual had such horrible racist ideas and beliefs, and a social group that confirmed and bolstered those beliefs, that he was planning on shooting up a synagogue or attacking a synagogue, and had a lot of other racist, murdering, raping fantasies that he wanted to carry out. To the FBI's credit, they busted it. They prevented what was going to happen, which is a really good thing. Let's go ahead and take a look. Reading from NBC, a former Marine is accused of leading a neo-Nazi group that was allegedly planning on an attack on a New York synagogue. Matthew Bellinger is charged with gun charges and could spend up to 20 years in prison if convicted, according to court documents. Of course, we're waiting on this to go through the courts, so in that sense, it's not 100% confirmed, but this is what has been revealed from the FBI. The FBI began investigating Bellinger, I might be pronouncing that wrong, because they suspected he was planning to harm people and destroy property in hate-motivated attacks, according to court documents filed this month. Quote, the investigation was grounded in evidence that the defendant was using social media to conspire with others, including members of a group called Rape Krieg. Rape Krieg is the name of the organization, to commit hate crimes, the documents said. Listen to this. This is just horrible stuff. The group, based on Long Island, so this is a racist group, had procured weapons, uniforms, and tactical gear, and discussed committing attacks on a synagogue, Jewish persons, women, and minorities, including the rape of enemies to injure, oppress, threaten, and intimidate, and the rape of white women to increase the population of white children, in furtherance of Rape Krieg's goal of creating a white ethno-state through accelerationist means. So we'll continue on in a second here, but this is an ideology that's growing, actually. Obviously, you think about the KKK, okay? A time in American history where there was this very popular social group that was centered around a hate for people based on their race. And we think about that type of group interactions on the decline in the United States, typically. But there's actually this resurgence in recent years of people joining up groups and adopting these ideologies that truly believe that other people are less than them because they are of a different race or a different gender. And even to the point where you hear in online spaces, if you're someone who consumes a lot of political content online, a massive growth of these online right-wing figures. And I just want to be clear, because I always want to be nuanced in my discussions around this. This is a very, very far right group. Plenty of people who consider themselves conservative, even very right wing, don't subscribe to this. So that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a very, very, very far right strand of the more general right. Okay. But you'll see these right wing figures online who literally advocate for ethno-states, who advocate that white people need to be protecting their own and trying to grow their own population, and that's why immigration's bad and all of these things. This is on the rise right now, especially in online circles, and other people would have to speak to other circles, but those are the ones that I'm aware of the most. And so the reason I'm covering this story is because it's so important that we recognize these harmful ideologies, and then obviously the FBI in this case prevented this particular attack and these individuals, but recognizing the larger pattern that we're seeing of people who hold these horrible, hateful ideologies, and trying to address that, trying to figure out how we can prevent people from being radicalized into that. Super important to prevent harm, of course. So let's continue reading. Other members of the group identified Bellinger as a leader and administrator of the group who had written Rappergregs. They spell it differently in this article. It's Rape Krieg right here, and then spelled differently here, but in that group's manifesto. Quote, rape, for example, is an extremely effective tool. This is from their manifesto. An extremely effective tool against our many foes, as its verbal use as a threat or direct use against an individual greatly reduces enemy morale and strikes a nameless fear in their hearts. Read part of the manifesto according to court documents. While this is especially effective against females, the emasculated cesspool of progressive males is just as affected, being inherently effeminate themselves. So you can hear so many of these talking points that are now becoming way too popular in this super far right space, where they talk constantly about how, liberal ideology is making people more effeminate, and because of that, in this case scenario, they're talking about rape for those individuals. And then in many cases, they have this obsession with using the violent action of raping someone as some sort of attack on an enemy of theirs to strike fear into their hearts. Disgusting stuff. One more horrible detail from this, again, outlining the ideology that is leading this group to wanting to attack a synagogue. Quote, if you have any doubts, this is, oh my goodness, okay, this is horrifying. If you have any doubts about being able to pull the trigger on a Jewish child, then you are not mentally prepared for the level of violence that the first world collapses will bring. To be successful in this battle for survival, the white man must learn to hate, seeing red the moment he lays his eyes on a member of the race that he has inflicted unspeakable horrors onto his people. Okay, so we're going to stop there. There's a lot more. You can look into it yourself, but just recognizing that this ideology exists in America is prevalent enough where people are able to build social groups around it. And again, credit to the FBI for busting this whole plan up, preventing it from happening. But it's super scary because even though more prominent right-wing figures don't use this specific of language, and I don't even think they necessarily have this horrible of ambitions, they do perpetuate the idea that, hey, you should take pride in being a white person, and you should look out for your own, and you should care about percentage of the United States than they were in previous generations, and all these things. That is harmful, because that should not be how we're dividing ourselves up at all. We should not be trying to pit ourselves against one another based on the color of our skin. As simple of a concept as that is, clearly it's super difficult for people to truly buy into that idea that we are all individual, we're all valuable, we all should have the ability to connect with one another and love one another, and not do so based on each other's race. So horrible stuff. It's an ideology that needs to be completely outcasted from society, and clearly we're not doing a good enough job of that right now. And I think part of that comes down to, how do we catch people before they get there? How do we prevent the radicalization to that super far right ideology? And that starts with really being critical of the more prominent right-wing figures who aren't perpetuating that, but they are kind of perpetuating this fear of you being replaced by non-white people, and no, white population's going down, and that's bad. And that needs to be heavily criticized, because it's what leads people to eventually getting to this type of ideology. To be clear, it's perfectly fine. I'm going to disagree with you if you have like irrational fears about, oh, there's too much immigration, blah, blah, blah. If it's genuinely that, because you think, incorrectly that causes a massive level of unemployment, if it causes them to take your jobs and stuff like that, we can talk about that. And that's not what I'm saying. You can have genuine critiques of our immigration system. You can believe there's too much of it. All of those things are not what I'm speaking to. I'm speaking to people who use the conversation of immigration to say, it's bad because it's replacing white people. It's bad because the white population is now proportionally less in the United States than it used to be. That's what I'm criticizing, and that's what I think leads to this. A healthy, even if incorrect, critique or issue with the way that immigration currently goes is not what I'm speaking to right now. I want to be clear on that. I'm not saying you can't criticize the level of immigration we have now without being called this guy. Of course not. But people are going farther than that, and they are trying to attach it to being white. And that's what's threatened, is the white people. And that cannot be accepted. Doug, yes, I'm back. I'm actually back in live. Grease Monkey said tequila helps a lot with confidence. No, this is not a simulation, Doug. I'm a real person here now speaking to you. Actually, there's probably like a 5-second delay, but besides that. Has anyone talked to me about monkeypox? Yes, my birthday was on Monday. True that. Turned 20. What? All right, let's do our last story. An interesting moment happened on Fox News when Senate candidate Tim Ryan was asked if he would support Joe Biden in a 2024 bid, and he kind of just ignored the question. He said, I don't want to speak to that right now. I'm focused on my own race. We'll get to that when we get to it, which is a fine response, and I think that's exactly what he should be saying. But I think it represents usually an incumbent president who has the ability to run again and has said they're planning on it, will get the support of people in their own party saying, yeah, if they're the nominee, I will, or if they choose to run, I'll support them. And that's been the response of most people who say, if Joe Biden runs, I'll support them. Just like, Bernie Sanders says that still. But I think people are recognizing, especially those like Tim Ryan, who is running in Ohio, so a very purple state, recognizing that maybe distancing himself from Biden is a good move because of how unpopular Biden is right now. So we're going to get to in a second Biden's unpopularity and how this might be a larger move of people in the Democratic Party trying to distance themselves from Biden in their midterm races. But first, let's just watch this moment that happened on Fox News.
Final question to you. There was the first presidential primary state New Hampshire poll. It came out yesterday, and it showed support for this president, President Joe Biden, for his reelection. It is plummeting. In fact, it suggested that Biden and Buttigieg are now tied in a hypothetical 2024 presidential primary matchup. Do you support the president in his reelection bid?
I'm working on my own election, and that's all I'm focused on right now. We've got a little under 4 months here in Ohio, and we're running a great campaign. We're up in the polls and working really hard, so I'm just going to focus on that, and then we can chat about that after I win and get in the United States Senate. I'll be happy to comment.
Well, I think it was noted that the president held an event there in your state recently, a speech on the economy, I believe, if my memory serves me, and you didn't show. That was certainly a message you were sending, right?
Well, it was an event where we saved 100,000 pensions in Ohio through the rescue package, which was significant. Many of those Teamsters, working class people. It was a great thing. But I had commitments in Southern Ohio, and I'm not going to back out on normal Ohioans, average Ohio.
I will say, don't ever say normal when you're a politician talking about your constituents or talking about, average voters, the everyday voter. When people say normal, it reminds me of those TV shows where, like Veep or something, where they're just so disconnected. They're like, okay, I need to go shake the hands of normal people. Give me a photo shoot with some normal people. I don't know why. Just normal makes it sound like you think of them as just a different species. But anyways, continuing.
Iowans to like a schedule that I had and then leave them to go see the president. Like, I'm not doing that stuff. These are great people, and I'm gonna keep my meetings. But we got to get focused on the economy, and that's what we're doing in rural areas as well. And that's where I've been campaigning. So I'm not gonna.
So I think that's interesting. I don't know. I might be reading too much into it, but it's pretty interesting when a candidate running in a certain party doesn't want to clearly say if the president, who's currently president, who may be running for re-election, chooses to, if he'll support them or not. kind of interesting. And I do think, like I said, it points to people within the Democratic Party recognizing Joe Biden's kind of toxic right now. And I think I can get more benefits from just making the race about only me and not about me representing Biden's agenda or the Democratic Party's agenda, because it's not looking so good right now. And it looks like Tim Ryan's running a good race, in a state that isn't some big blue bastion. He's doing really well, and that's good news. So quickly to get to Joe Biden's polling and why maybe Tim Ryan is afraid to attach his name to Biden very heavily. You can see here from 538, now Biden's approval is all the way down to 38.4%. Whew, that is brutal. 38.4% approval, 56.4% disapproval. So that might be it. When you're running in a state where the majority of the people that you're trying to win over likely aren't going to have the most favorable view of Joe Biden, maybe you don't come out and attach your name to him. Maybe you don't say that you're supporting him in his race. Now, do I think this level of disapproval for Biden is warranted? I don't. I think a lot of the factors that are causing people to disapprove of him are economic related, and those economic factors would have been at play with any president just based on the horrible economic conditions that kind of spiraled out of control after the pandemic that would have happened under any president. But I think it's smart, if you're a Democrat and you're trying to run your own race, to be cognizant of the fact that Biden is very unpopular right now, and maybe you have a better chance of running your race and being successful in it if you don't be seen, with linked arms with him too much. So interesting stuff. I think Biden needs to do something, because if he's unpopular, that is going to hurt Democrats in the midterms. I think he needs to attempt to get some sort of victory, some sort of representation of the fact that he is working on behalf of people. He is trying to make their economic conditions better. But with the political situation we have in the Senate, it's tough to do that, and I recognize that for sure. So he should be trying to pump out executive orders that are popular as well, and just rhetorically going out and fighting for stuff he believes in. But we're not seeing that to the extent that we should. That's unfortunate, and an interesting moment all around from Tim Ryan. Luke, have you ever worn a campaign? What does that mean? Worn a campaign? What don't you like about Tim Ryan, Doug? Yeah, gas is dropping a lot right now. It's still super high, but hold up. Let me respond to this. Over $6, yeah. When I was in LA, I was just there, but I wasn't paying attention because I wasn't driving. But when I was living there, right before I moved back to Austin, it was like 7 in some of the places I was going to. So even though 6 is still high, it is a decrease, Oh, worked on a campaign. I've minimally participated, but not been a part of the inner circle of a campaign or anything like that. $3.49 if you look hard enough in Houston. Wow. But $3.99 if you don't. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I'm excited about the prospect of Tim Ryan. He seems good enough, for sure. All right, y'all. Like I said, I have a dinner to get to, but after I get back, after I get some work done, if any of you are still awake super late, I will hop on and live stream so that we can watch some of those Turning Point USA events that happened over the weekend, just because they're hilarious to watch. So check later tonight if you want some of that. But until then, much love. Thanks for tuning in. I'll try to have all my audio on next time. And I'll see you either later tonight